Muchísimas gracias al Dr. Mistral por su intervención. Para continuar con nuestra agenda académica, damos paso al Dr. Lorenzo Pavone, Deputy Head, Partnership and Network Unit de la OECD Development Center, quien nos hablará sobre el talento y la educación como aspectos fundamentales para insertarse en las cadenas globales de valor. Bienvenido.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. Thanks to Andy for the invitation today, Santiago and colleagues. This one? Okay. Okay, today I will speak about skills and education to integrate global value chains. Which is a very important topic, not just for Colombia, more in general for Latin America. And the idea is that skills and education are, at the moment, the key element to try to integrate global value chains and also support economic diversification, which is, in a context of challenging economic development, key to boost competitiveness and re-establish economic growth in the region. So, for this presentation, I will use two main publications that the OECD has released recently. One is the Latin America Economic Outlook 2016, which talks about the relationship between Latin America and China. And in this case, China can be a very good example on, from one side, policy responses that have been conducted to increase skills and education and to also, I would say, better respond to challenging times. And at the same time, this publication on Business Insights on emerging markets is a summary of the discussions that we had at the OECD in a network of multinational companies doing business in the emerging economies, where participants meet to discuss challenges and opportunities that they found doing business in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And in this case, there are very interesting things that can be learned for Colombia, Latin America, and more in general for companies that want to better integrate global value chains. I will start by a quick overview of the challenging macroeconomic context of this region, to move then to what are the key elements and key policies that can help Latin America improve skills and education to boost competitiveness and ultimately integrate global value chains. I know it's almost lunchtime, so I will try to be quick, also to make sure that the food doesn't get cold. So let's start with the economic overview. Now, Latin America has been growing very fast, and since 2002 to 2014 was growing at much higher rates than OECD countries. Unfortunately, since 2014, this has changed, and now is recording even a negative economic growth. We calculated in 2015 a slight recession, a minus 0.3%. For 2016, the prospects are even more negative, minus 0.5%, and there is hope that in 2017, Latin America could catch up with OECD countries around 2% growth. Now, what are the reasons of this situation? Well, we have a weak global demand that is affecting the exports. There are volatile financial markets and low commodity prices affecting those countries that design their economic development around the exports of commodities. Global growth is very much flat, and you can see in the left-hand side of the chart that the OECD actually revised the significantly negative forecast for the next couple of years, 2016 and 2017. This difference is what was first forecasted in November 2015 in the last OECD Economic Outlook, and revised in February 2016. So just 3 months later, you can see the big difference in forecast, showing that there is a quite negative overview on the global outlook. Global outlook, if the global outlook is negative, of course, trade is flat, and imports and the demand of products become weak. And of course, if an economy based its developments on the exports, then of course this can be very challenging. Commodity prices have been falling, and I would like to highlight that we're not just talking about oil and gas, which are always on the headlines, but we can say the same for metals, minerals, for food and beverages, and more in general, agricultural raw materials. Financial markets have declined in the past months, and obviously that had an effect also on the emerging economies' volatility. And sovereign bond spreads have increased significantly in the past few months. Now, this is a very negative outlook. I would like to ask you, since this is an audience of companies, how many companies, how many of you have in your companies decided expansion plans and invested in new activities over the past 12 months? Can you raise your hands? Okay. How many of you have put on hold projects or decided not to do anything for the moment and maybe reconsider new investments in 2017 or 2018? Can you raise your hands? Okay, I see that there is a slight majority of companies that decided to put projects on hold and to maybe reconsider a later situation in 2017. Well, this very much is in line with this chart that shows that the economic slowdown affected dramatically the investments. And the investment components here is the gray part of the chart. You can see that in 2014 became a negative component of GDP growth. And this means that there is a lack of confidence from investments in the future. Now, if we just talk about economic development in Latin America, you see that there are very diversified situations in the region. Some countries are doing better than others. We have recorded let's say an important recession this year in countries like Brazil, Venezuela, Argentina, but there are also some countries, that Colombia is among them, that have been growing, although at a rate that is not that high as that recorded, let's say, in the period of economic boom and high commodity prices. Colombia, just to give you a few recent data, it's grown 3% in 2015 versus an average of Latin America, which is more or less zero growth. Is expected to slow down in 2016 to 2% and go back to 3% in 2017. This is a bit better than the situation on Latin America, which will record, according to our analysis, still a recession at the end of 2016 to become positive again around 2% in 2017. Now, what has been a policy response to this challenging situation? Well, devaluation of the exchange rate to support exports, which, however, caused high inflation in most of the countries that we analyzed in the region, and fiscal stimulus, which, however, are increasing public debt. So there isn't that much room to operate on this area. So what can governments do to sort of stimulate growth and try to change this trend? Well, one solution is to work on productivity labor. And we already discussed productivity before today. And what we can see in this chart is that productivity in Latin America is not very high. This is Korea, and the increase of productivity as a percentage of the US in the past years. This starts, as you can see, I don't know if you notice very well, but it's around the 60s or up to now. Now, if we compare it to Latin America, you can see that Latin America went very much the other direction. And these are also examples of some countries. This is Colombia that followed very much the trend of Latin America. It's even behind that. And the last that I'm showing here is China, which, as you can see, is growing very much and now reached the same level of productivity as Colombia. And very soon also overall Latin America. This is important. That means that the labor productivity in Colombia and in China is more or less the same. And we always think about China as a place to produce cheap products and low value-added activities. Well, it's catching up with Colombia and with Latin America. So don't look at China just as a place to produce cheap merchandise and textile, but more like a new country that is coming out on high value-added activities on knowledge-intensive sectors. Now, this chart talks about the middle income trap, which is basically a theory that shows that it's easy, or let's say it's possible for countries to reach the middle income level, but it's very much a challenge to overcome the middle level and join, let's say, the high income club. And Latin America, and as you can see here, is lagging a little bit behind, especially Asian countries. And only some, like Chile, Uruguay, and Argentina, managed to reach the level of the high income, but in a situation that is not comparable for the moment with Singapore, Japan, Korea, for example. What does it mean overcoming the middle income trap? It means basically investing in education, in skills, in technologies to upgrade production to new and advanced sectors that can create dynamic that can also bring, for example, to a new digital economy and other activities that can create more wealth and more dynamic economy. Now, here I'm going to show some evolution of the GDP per capita in some OECD, Asian, and Latin American economies to see a bit what has been this evolution related to overcoming the middle income trap. Now I'm starting by showing a few countries that have reached the level of high-income countries more or less between the 70s and the 90s. And then there is another wave that is more recent in the year 2000. So as you can see, there is a group that very much is the first wave between the 80s and 90s, and then a new wave, especially from Asia, that came recently. And this is Latin America. So what is important here is to see that at the beginning of this chart, in 1950, Latin America was at the same level as many of these countries in Western Europe, in Asia. But then while most of them reached the level of high-income countries, Latin America still needs to get there. And the last one that you can see in blue is actually China, that just recently overcome also Latin America. So, to summarize, the macroeconomic outlook is challenging. There are some structural characteristics of the region that cannot be changed just by fiscal and monetary policies, because there are not any more possibilities to operate on that field. And there is a need instead to work on more structural changes to improve productivity and to focus on infrastructure, and of course to work on skills and education. And let's move exactly to skills and education as a lever to increase competitiveness in Latin America. I'll start by showing you here the composition of exports in Colombia and benchmark it to other countries in the region, and also from OECD countries. So, as you can see, Colombia has a composition of export mainly based on hard commodities and agriculture, and the percentage of manufacturer that is exported is very limited. I would say that also if you look at Latin America as an average, this shows that Colombia's economy is very much based on commodities exports, and that it's not super encouraging in a situation where commodity prices are lagging behind, they're going down. So there is a need to invest in the tertiary education, in more dynamic sectors, in industry. But if we take a look at this chart, and here we start to give some examples of China, that, as I said, are based on our latest outlook. This is a projection of the population with tertiary education in China and Latin America until 2030. As you can see, the situation, the starting point now is more or less the same, but if you look at 2030, 200 million people in China will have tertiary education, 23% of the population. And this will be basically 1 out of 5 compared to Latin America. So China is increasingly able to capture more investments in manufacture, in knowledge-intensive sectors. Why? Because they will have more people that can be employed and that can help investors move on with their projects. And of course, in a global economy, that means that these investments, instead of coming, for example, to Latin America, will go to China. And therefore, there is a big threat, let's say, for the region to lose projects and in value-added parts of the economy. Another element here is the composition of what people study, the composition of the degrees, and what we can see here is that students with high education in China mainly study science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, whereas in Latin America it's more human, social sciences, and let's say less engineers and mathematics. So this means also that, again, if I'm a company that wants to invest in digital technologies and in advanced technologies, I will probably look more at a country that can offer me the possibility to hire engineers and scientists, rather than, let's say, countries that offer more let's say, graduates in humanities and social sciences. Not surprisingly, here we can see that the announced R&D projects in Latin America are very much low compared to, of course, OECD countries, Western Europe, the United States, but also Asia, and in particular, notice China. Now, another interesting things to see about China is that if you look at the composition of the GDP in China, we always say now that China is slowing down. But what is slowing down is manufacturing, secondary activities. But if you look at the tertiary sector, it's actually very much resilient. So investing in economic diversification, in value-added sectors, and in services is actually a recipe to be resilient during periods of economic uncertainty. Now, I'll give a few examples now of companies and what do they think about the importance of skills, with a specific focus here on manpower. Manpower and Latin America in particular, they run a survey called Talent Shortage Survey, where they ask employers in Latin America if they have problems in finding the right people for their jobs. And the global average is 71% of employers in Brazil, for example, are struggling with this issue. And this average is very much also the same for the rest of the region. So there is a challenge of skill shortage. There is a need to unlock regional talents and to overcome these mismatches that have been noticed. And something that has been already mentioned today, the need, of course, to do some public-private cooperation. So companies need to talk to education institutions with governments and identify together which are the areas that where there is a larger need of graduates to satisfy the needs of the private sector. Minister Luna today just said about this aspect that also there is an important need to align the private sector with the education sector, and definitely this is a right path to increase the cooperation between the businesses and universities and find more talents and find more jobs for them. So here are some examples of public-private partnerships for education and skills in Latin America. One in Brazil and one from Colombia. I won't go too much into the details, but the idea is to show that by working together, the private sector and the universities, with the support of governments, it's possible to increase the percentage of graduates and also to make sure that they can therefore after their graduations, find jobs in line with their expectations. Let me give you now, now another example of a famous company, Huawei. They have a large presence in Latin America and has become one of the key players in telecommunication in the region. They made several investments in education. I can mention 4 ICT centers in Mexico to train electronics and telecommunications engineering students and teachers. Also in Brazil, they opened recently a training center for ICT students, which is the 4th in Latin America. To give a comparison, there are 45 around the world. So we hope that there will be even more coming to Latin America. A French company, Schneider Electric, they just opened a center of excellence in Colombia to develop skills in the energy sector. And this is a successful cooperation between the French Minister of National Education, which is supporting the project, the Escuela Tecnológica Instituto Técnico Central in Colombia, and of course, Schneider Electric. So how are they working together? ETITC is providing the premises. The French government is offering some technical expertise, and Schneider Electric is providing basically curricula aligned with their needs and their latest developments in terms of R&D and innovation, and also some training resources and equipment. This project also had the possibility to facilitate access to training for underprivileged young people, therefore increasing even more opportunities for formal employment in Colombia. Now, in this slide, I'm summarizing some of the key outcomes of the discussions that we had in the Emerging Markets Network that I mentioned earlier in my presentation. What are companies finding as challenges in Latin America when they want to invest in skills and innovation in the region? Well, first of all, what is important is to address the issue of red tape and bureaucracy that can slow down the possibility to obtain some certification for corporate training. Imagine if I'm a company, I'm investing in a new training center, I want to make sure that my curriculum is officially recognized so that the people that I train, then not only they can work for me, but they can also find later other employment and be officially recognized as trained by my company. Education priorities, again, needs to be aligned with the employer's expectations and demands on specific competencies that are requested. English and other foreign languages are key to open to international markets. Nowadays, if you don't speak English, it's very difficult to invest abroad and to do business with foreign companies. With globalization, there is, of course, the challenge of integrating corporate cultures in a single company. And this is also something where more and more companies are investing to create a good working environment in an international context. And of course, the importance of proactive investment promotion and facilitation policies made by governments to support investments in education. Now, let's move on the global value chain. So how all these policies that governments can do can help companies integrate into global value chains. I will start again with a few examples of the difference between Latin America and China. And I want to show you here the contribution to global growth of selected economies. If you look at the situation in 1991 and 95 to the one that we recorded in the past decade, 2011 and 2015, you can see that China, in red, has increased dramatically its contribution to global growth, whereas Latin America stayed very much flat. Starting from a situation 20 years ago, or more or less the same contribution to global growth, now Latin America's contribution is 5 times lower than the Chinese one. But what does that mean? It means that the size, the weight of China in the global economy is very high, and it's important for Latin America to try to catch up with that. We talked about how important is China. Well, this chart shows what would be the effect on Latin America's GDP of a negative scenario of growth in China. Now China, as I said, is slowing down. What if this slowing down continues and even worsen? Well, then will cost 2% of GDP growth in Latin America. Now, if we talk about the trade between Latin America and China, we can see that this experienced an unprecedented expansions in recent years. And I can give you also some examples. For example, Colombia's trade with China multiplied 46 times since 2000, and Latin America 21 times. So Colombia actually increased significantly its trade with China. Just to give you some numbers to compare, the trade between Latin America and the US and with the EU multiplied by 3% and 5% respectively. So there has been a huge increase of the relationship with China. Today, Colombia's trade with China is comparable with that of the European Union. Still smaller, though, than with the United States. But what is the composition of this trade? Well, if you look at the business linkages between Latin America and China, you can see that in recent years, they have exploded. And now, basically, trading with China is more important than intra-regional trade. What does that mean? It means that for a company in Latin America, it's easier to trade with China than with their neighbors. And that could be explained by trade policies that encouraged exchanges with China and less with other parts of the region. Here we see also another important aspect, that most of the trade, though, is still in low value-added activities. So if you look at the high value-added activities, which are the ones highlighted by the red dots, you can see that the exports to China are very little compared to the other part, which is low-ending activities and commodities. Whereas on the other hand, Latin America imports lots of value-added products from China. So there is a larger disproportion between what Latin America exports to China and what it's importing from China. But beyond trade, what is important is also to establish a relationship of foreign direct investment. And now China represents, Latin America represents only about 50% of, 25%, sorry, of China's outward FDI. And there is room to improve and to make continent more attractive, especially for those companies, like I mentioned Huawei, that are in digital and sectors and in more knowledge-intensive industries. But to do so, it's important to understand what companies are looking for when they make investments. And again, here I'm going to give a few highlights of our discussions. 4 main points. First, competitive labor market. Second, local partners. I'm not just talking about public partners, but also private partners, meaning businesses that can be partners in R&D, they can be partners in selling their products, or can be part of manufacturing their components. Regulatory framework, and this has been already mentioned today also, especially if we talk about digital economies, how difficult it is sometimes for governments and policymakers to actually catch up with the fast speed of innovation in digital economies. And how it's important, though, to make our the environment, the business environment friendly to foreign investors. And finally, infrastructure, which of course includes transportation, IT, telecom, but also environment. Now, if you look at the competitive labor market, here again, we show you another survey that has been run by the World Bank. It's called the World Bank Enterprise Survey, and this shows that still now Latin America is considered one of the most challenging regions to find adequate skills for companies investing in these countries. Some elements why it's challenging. Well, young population that need a work now studies, incomplete integration of women, high level of informality, and of course lack of skills that are demanded by the private sector. Now, in terms of local partners, I want to give you a good example here, a positive one, actually, from Robert Bosch, Mexico, that recently made an investment to expand their existing activities in Aguascalientes in Mexico. And they basically produce there some safety systems like braking systems or electronic stability programs. And basically, they decided to expand their production facility over there, creating 200 new jobs. This, if I'm not mistaken, is an investment from 2014-15 that was announced at that time. What are the key success factors? Well, support from national and local authorities. In this case, the governor of the state of Aguascalientes was involved, the municipality, but also the Ministry of Economic Development. Strategic location, cluster, automotive industry cluster in Aguascalientes, which highlights the importance of creating clusters where companies can find appropriate partners, but also adequate employees for their activities. And then here there is a quote from the president of Robert Bosch, Mexico, that exactly talk about the dedication of local partner or their local partners that have made these plants a model for quality and efficiency. So the key is to find good and reliable partners for making their investment successful. Now, if we talk about regulatory framework, this is an index built by the OECD that basically analyzes how friendly is a country for companies investing in various sectors. Actually, they cover 22 sectors, from agriculture, mining, manufacturing, services. And for each sector, the scoring is based on elements like foreign equity ownership, procedures to apply for investments, restriction on key foreign personnel, and others such as land ownership and corporate organizations. And you can see that Colombia is, I don't know if I can point with this one. Colombia is very much in a good position, below the OECD average. So it's considered as a friendly place for foreign investors. However, there are still some challenges, like, for example, here we are looking at the ease of doing business ranking of the World Bank, but also if you look at the number of procedures required to start a business, Colombia is here more or less in line with Latin America, but if you look at the OECD, it's very much lower. And the same goes for the cost of starting a business. Colombia is not doing that bad, compared especially with the Latin American average, but OECD level are much lower. So there is room for improvement. And finally, infrastructure. Here, Colombia has some let's say, room for improvement again, and in particular, you see here the ratio of freight costs to tariffs, which means how much is the logistics cost compared to the tariffs that companies face in a given country. And Colombia is the highest in at least in the countries that have been put into this study. In general, we can say that in Latin America, the ratio is 3 times the OECD average already, and Colombia, Costa Rica, and Peru are more than 20 times the OECD average. So what can be done to decrease, let's say, logistics costs and make Latin America, but also Colombia, more competitive in a global market? Well, of course, there is a need to cut the logistics cost, which they can add up to 42% of total sales of SMEs. Of course, logistics costs are more important for small companies compared to large ones. Improve transport infrastructure, simplify custom procedures, and of course, also enhance logistics education, the use of ICTs, and more in general, the enabling environment. I want to conclude with a couple of examples of companies that are considered as good examples of companies and players, let's say, in global value chains. The first is Airbus. As you can see, Airbus, everybody knows Airbus is one of the companies that worldwide, especially in the aerospace industry, has well-established global value chains, and while they focus more on innovation, more and more on innovation on high-end and advanced technologies sourced throughout the world. And basically they focus on a good governance of the supply chains and on partnerships. And finally, also, they help their suppliers improve their performance according to their needs. So not only there is an opportunity working with companies like Airbus to get more business, but also to improve and to benefit from technology transfer. Well, final example also, because it's lunchtime and because I'm Italian, I cannot not mention Nutella. Everybody knows Ferrero, and Nutella is probably doesn't need any introduction. But Nutella is a very interesting case because they produce 250,000 tons of Nutella every year. Nutella is sold in 75 countries, but it's interesting also to see that the way that they operate as a global operator. They basically, they have 9 production facilities around the world. They tend to be close to the market. And there are 2 in Latin America. One is actually in Brazil, another one in Argentina. They have a key sales office here in Colombia. What they do is basically some inputs are locally supplied, for example, milk, and also the packaging, but more in general, ingredients are globally supplied. Hazelnuts come from Turkey, palm oil from Malaysia, cocoa from Nigeria, sugar mainly from Brazil, but also from Europe, and the vanilla flavor from China. Now, this is interesting because the vanilla flavor, yes, comes from China, but is made in China by a French company to make things more complicated. So this example is also important to show that global value chains are not just in manufacturing, in industries, but are also in food and agriculture. And today we already discussed the importance of agriculture for Colombia. Now again, to conclude, skills and education are key to integrate global value chains, especially in challenging economic environments, and to integrate global value chains. It's important adequate policy responses to improve competitiveness and facilitate global value chains integration. New productions that are more focused on high value added sectors, skills development, vocational training, involvement of the private sector, the enrollment of students in science and technologies, university programs, and also important regional strategy versus international partners. And here, for example, we can mention regional platforms and how it's important if Latin America wants to compete with big giants, like for example China, to have one single voice versus them rather than be fragmented. It's much easier in terms of bargaining power to face China as a region rather than each country bilaterally. So, and the current slowdown reveals what? What reveals structural characteristics of commodity-based growth. So there is an issue of countries that focused very much on commodity-based growth, on exporting commodities. It's important to diversify, to invest in skills, and to be able to move up the value chain. I conclude here. Thank you very much for your attention.